Today, we're going to drive the Bugatti Chiron for the first time since the accident. We come so close in the last video to being able to drive it, but we did manage to fit the new interior and the new radiators. But
something was not right from the very beginning, and nobody fully noticed it at the time. A warning light appears on the dashboard. A transmission fault message flashes for just a moment. The engine sounds strong, but underneath that power, something feels unstable, almost like the car is holding itself together by force rather than perfection. On paper, this is a Bugatti Veyron, one of the most advanced and expensive machines ever built in automotive history. A car designed to move faster than most aircraft can take off. A machine engineered with extreme precision, where every system is supposed to work in perfect harmony. But in this moment, none of that perfection feels real. Instead, what we see is tension. Small faults begin to appear, not one by one in a clean pattern, but randomly, unpredictably, like hidden cracks slowly spreading inside a structure that still looks perfect on the outside. And this is where the story truly begins, not with success, but with uncertainty. Because what happens next is not just a simple repair journey. It becomes a chain of problems that refuses to stop. Every time one issue is fixed, another one appears. Every time the car is tested, something unexpected fails. And slowly, a question starts forming in the background of every video, every rebuild step, every high-speed attempt. Is this car actually being restored, or is it being held together just enough to keep moving for the camera? This is the uncomfortable part of the story that no one wants to say out loud at first. Because watching the rebuild, everything looks impressive. The tools, the garage, the technical skill, the effort, all of it looks professional and determined. But underneath that surface, there's a growing pattern of instability. A gearbox that does not behave consistently. Electrical faults that appear without warning. Systems that work one day and fail the next. And most importantly, a feeling that the car is never fully fixed, only temporarily improved before the next breakdown arrives. This is not just a mechanical issue anymore. It becomes a mystery. A question of whether modern engineering problems can even be fully solved outside the factory environment of a hypercar like this. As the story continues, the tension grows stronger, because every viewer can see it now. This is not a normal rebuild where a broken car becomes fully restored and moves on. This is something different, something more complicated. A cycle of repair, test, failure, and repair again. And in the middle of it all stands one of the most famous automotive creators, pushing forward despite uncertainty, while the car itself seems to be resisting every step of progress. And that is where curiosity turns into concern, and concern slowly turns into a bigger question that no one can ignore anymore. How far can this rebuild really go before it reaches a point of no return? As the rebuild continued, the situation became more serious than it first appeared, and the early warning signs slowly turned into a clear pattern that could no longer be ignored. What started as small faults in the system began to grow into repeated mechanical and electrical problems that kept returning even after repairs were made. At first, each issue looked isolated. A sensor fault here, a gearbox warning there, a temporary loss of power during testing. But over time, these problems began to connect in a way that painted a very different picture of the car's condition. This was not just a collection of random failures anymore. It started to look like a system that was never fully stabilizing after repair work. One of the most concerning parts of this pattern was how unpredictable the faults became. The car would perform normally during one test, then suddenly trigger warnings during the next. In some moments, everything would feel perfect. Strong acceleration, smooth gear changes, stable power delivery. And then, without clear warning, the system would enter limp mode or shut down key functions, forcing the test to stop immediately. For a vehicle like the Bugatti Veyron, which is designed to handle extreme speeds and heavy performance loads, this inconsistency raised serious questions. A hypercar of this level is not supposed to behave like a normal road car with occasional glitches. It is supposed to operate with extreme stability under controlled conditions. But here, stability seemed to be the biggest missing piece. Even more interesting was the way each repair seemed to solve only part of the problem. A faulty component would be replaced, and for a short time, things would improve. But soon after, another issue would appear somewhere else in the system. It was almost like fixing one weak point was simply shifting pressure to another hidden weak point inside the car. This created a cycle where progress never felt complete. Instead of reaching a final fixed state, the car kept returning to a state of partial recovery, followed by another breakdown. As viewers watched these events unfold, a new level of curiosity developed. People were no longer just watching to see the car get repaired. They were watching to understand why it kept failing in different ways. Was it the complexity of the engineering? Was it the result of modifications that changed original systems? Or was it simply the challenge of working on a machine that was never designed to be rebuilt outside a factory environment? These questions became part of the story itself. And with each new video, the uncertainty grew stronger, because instead of moving closer to a final solution, the project seemed to be moving through layers of deeper problems that had not been visible at the beginning. The car was still impressive, still powerful, still capable of incredible performance in moments. But those moments were becoming harder to sustain. And in between those moments, the faults kept returning, reminding everyone that this rebuild was not following a simple path from broken to fixed. It was becoming something far more complicated, a long and unpredictable struggle to keep one of the world's most advanced machines operating outside the environment it was originally designed for. There was a moment in this story that changed the entire direction of how people viewed the rebuild, and it happened not in the garage, but on the runway, where the Bugatti was supposed to show its true power. This was the kind of test that defines a hypercar. Not slow driving, not short trips, but sustained high-speed performance. The environment where a Bugatti Veyron is supposed to feel completely in control. Everything leading up to this moment looked promising on the surface. The car had been prepared, checked, and tested. The conditions seemed right, and there was a sense of expectation that this would finally be the moment where the rebuild proved itself. But what actually happened was very different. At first, the car behaved normally. It responded to acceleration. It moved with the kind of force that reminds everyone why this machine is so special. For a brief time, it felt like everything was finally working as intended. The engine pulled strongly. The systems were active, and the car entered a performance state that should have allowed it to continue pushing forward. But then, without warning, the situation began to change. A fault appeared. A system warning triggered. And slowly, the stability that had been built up over weeks of work started to disappear in seconds. Instead of continuing to run, the car was forced to stop. The test that was supposed to demonstrate success turned into another breakdown moment. One more entry in a growing list of failures. What made this moment even more important was not just the failure itself, but the timing of it. This was not a small issue during a normal drive. This was a controlled high-speed environment where everything is supposed to be perfect. And yet, even here, the car could not maintain consistency. For many viewers, this was the point where the narrative began to shift. Until this moment, there was still a belief that the rebuild was progressing, even if slowly. But after this failure, that belief started to weaken. Because a Bugatti Veyron cannot complete a high-speed test after extensive rebuilding, then the question becomes unavoidable. What exactly has been achieved so far? The emotional impact of this moment was strong, because it represented more than just a mechanical issue. It felt like a breaking point in the story itself, a moment where effort, time, and expectation all collided with reality. And that reality was not simple success or simple failure. It was something in between: a machine that works, but not reliably, a rebuild that functions, but not fully, a project that continues, but without clear completion. After this event, every future test was viewed differently, no longer with confidence, but with caution, because once a system fails under extreme conditions, every next attempt carries that memory with it. And that is what makes this moment so important in the overall story. It did not just stop a run. It changed how people saw the entire rebuild going forward. After mechanical failures and the dramatic runway setback, the story begins to shift into another layer that is often less exciting, but far more important in the long run. The financial reality of the rebuild. On the surface, it still looks like a smart project. A damaged Bugatti Veyron bought for under £1 million, repaired and brought back to life with careful work and independent skill. Compared to the official Bugatti service costs, which are known to be extremely high, this already looks like a win. But when you look deeper into the full picture, the situation becomes more complicated. Because the real question is not just how much was saved compared to factory prices, but what the final condition of the car actually represents after all the spending, time, and effort. The car is not just about repair costs. It is about value, reliability, and long-term condition. And this is where the debate begins. Every modification, every replacement part, every custom change add a layer of complexity that affects how the car is viewed in the collector market. A Bugatti Veyron in original condition is already rare and valuable. But once changes are introduced, even well-intended improvements, the originality of the vehicle starts to shift. And in the world of high-value hypercars, originality is often just as important as performance. This means that even if money is saved during repairs, the overall market value does not always increase in the same way. In some cases, it can even decrease because collectors often prefer untouched or factory restored examples over heavily modified versions. So the financial outcome is not as simple as spent less, save more. It becomes a balancing act between repair costs, modification impact, and long-term value retention. At the same time, there's also the ongoing cost of continuous issues, because a car that keeps developing faults does not just require one-time repair spending. It requires repeated diagnostics, parts replacement, testing, and labor over and over again. This creates a situation where the rebuild is not a single financial event, but a continuous investment process with no clear final number. And this is where the concern grows, because when a project keeps generating new problems, the total cost becomes harder to control or predict. The financial side of the story starts to mirror the mechanical side, incomplete, ongoing, and constantly changing. And while the content around the project may show progress and excitement, the underlying financial reality tells a more uncertain story. One where success is not measured only by how the car looks or performs in short moments, but by whether it can truly reach a stable, finished state without requiring constant intervention. While most people focus on the mechanical failures and the dramatic runway breakdown, there's another problem sitting underneath the entire project that is even more limiting in a practical sense: the legal status of the car. This is a part of the story that does not get as much attention in highlight moments, but it defines what the car can actually do in real life. Because no matter how powerful, expensive, or perfectly engineered a vehicle is, it means very little if it cannot legally be driven on public roads. And this is exactly where the Bugatti rebuild reaches a difficult situation. The car, after extensive modification and ongoing repair work, is not fully road registered in its current state. That means it cannot legally be used on public roads in the United Kingdom, which immediately changes how the entire project functions. Instead of being a fully restored hypercar ready for real-world use, it becomes a machine that is limited to private spaces, workshops, and controlled environments. This restriction creates a major gap between expectation and reality, because the original idea of restoring a Bugatti Veyron is not just about making it run again. It is about returning it to full usability, including legal road use, proper certification, and full compliance with regulations. But achieving that with a heavily modified hypercar is not simple. The systems involved in modern vehicle approval are strict, especially when it comes to emissions, safety standards, and structural changes. Even small modifications can create complications in approval processes. And in the case of a hypercar like this, the complexity increases even more. This means the car enters a long and uncertain process where each requirement must be checked, tested, and approved before it can legally return to the road. And until that process is fully completed, the car remains in a kind of legal limbo. It exists physically, it runs in certain conditions, but cannot function as a normal road vehicle. This creates a unique situation where the rebuild is not only about fixing mechanical systems, but also about navigating regulatory systems that were never designed for such extreme modifications done outside the factory. As this reality becomes clearer, it adds another layer of tension to the project. Because even if the mechanical issues were fully resolved, the legal barriers alone would still prevent full completion. And this raises an important question that sits quietly behind the entire story. What does it really mean for a rebuild to be successful if the car cannot legally return to the road it was originally designed for? As the rebuild continues, the focus slowly shifts away from just machines, parts, and technical systems, and begins to reveal something more human underneath it all. Because no matter how advanced a car is, it is still being driven forward by people, decisions, pressure, and expectations. And in the case of this Bugatti project, that pressure becomes harder to ignore as the problems keep stacking up. What started as an exciting challenge gradually turns into a long-term responsibility that demands constant attention, problem-solving, and emotional energy. Every breakdown is not just a mechanical setback. It is also a moment that affects momentum, planning, and mindset. When a project grows to this level of complexity, especially one that is being documented publicly, there is an invisible weight that builds over time. Viewers expect progress, results, and breakthroughs. At the same time, the real-world reality of working on such a complicated machine does not always move in a straight line. Some days bring success, but other days bring repeated faults that delay everything again. This creates a cycle where progress and frustration exist side by side. And over time, that cycle starts to influence how the project feels from the inside, as well as how it looks from the outside. The key moment in this part of the story is not a single breakdown or a single repair, but a shift in tone. A moment where the excitement of discovery begins to mix with signs of exhaustion and realism. When a project reaches this stage, every decision becomes more important. Because every repair is no longer just about fixing a problem. It is about deciding the direction of the entire build. Should the focus be on performance recovery or reliability? Should originality be preserved? Or should modifications continue if they improve function? These are not simple technical questions anymore. They are strategic decisions that affect the future of the entire vehicle. And this is where the human side becomes visible. Because behind every diagnostic test and every repair step, there's a person trying to balance engineering ambition